why does pricing transparency matter? It's one of the first questions that businesses owners raise when they begin to look seriously at AI. How much is it going to cost me? And not because they're necessarily expecting a single numbers, and not because they want to compare providers line by line, but because pricing signals judgment. It signals whether work will be scoped carefully, whether risk will be managed deliberately, and whether effort is likely to be proportionate to value. Now, some AI providers may avoid this discussion. So in this video, I want to explain how 80/20 Green scopes its AI engagements, what drives implementation costs, and why we deliberately avoid fixed prices. The aim is to give you a clear mental model for how to think about pricing, not to persuade you towards a particular outcome. There is no meaningful standard price for AI implementation. AI work doesn't price like software licenses or hardware installations. The costs are driven primarily by how a business operates, not by the sophistication of the technology involved. Two businesses of similar size can face very different AI implementation costs because their workflows differ in structure and variation, their levels of coordination differ, their data sensitivity differs, and their tolerance for operational risk will differ. A business with a small number of linear workflows and clear ownership typically requires less effort than a business with many overlapping processes, frequent exceptions, and unclear handoffs. So for this reason, pricing must start with understanding operations, not with selecting tools. At 80/20 Green, pricing is anchored in the AI audit. The audit is not a sales step, it is a decision-making step. It exists to identify where AI can be applied, which opportunities are worth pursuing first, and what should be deferred or avoided. From a pricing perspective, this matters because it prevents overscoping. Rather than pricing everything that could theoretically be automated, the audit narrows focus to the few opportunities that matter most, with effort and risk clearly understood. This allows pricing to be tied to real work rather than hypothetical potential. What is priced in the AI audit? Well, the AI audit itself is a discrete engagement with a defined scope and cost. So the price of the AI audit is typically influenced by the number of core workflows that will be reviewed, the number of roles involved in those workflows, the degree of variation within each workflow, and the depth of mapping and analysis required. For example, a business with 3 well-defined workflows and clear ownership will usually require less audit effort than a business with 10 loosely defined workflows and shared ownership across teams. Importantly, the audit is priced independently of any future build or deployment work. The audit is just a standalone piece of work. Its value lies in the clarity and prioritization that it provides, even if no implementation proceeds afterwards. A core principle of sensible pricing is separating stages. So the audit stage and the build and deployment stage are priced separately because they involve different types of work and different types of risk. The audit focuses on understanding, mapping, and prioritization. The build phase focuses on designing workflows, preparing prompts, templates, and rules, and handling exceptions explicitly. Then the deployment phase focuses on access control, testing, limited rollout, monitoring, and adjustment. We bundle these two together, build and deployment, into one price because you don't want to build and then not deploy. They come as a package. Now, so separating the audit stage from the build and deployment stage avoids you committing early to unnecessary work and keeps the pricing aligned with when decisions are made along the way. So when we're looking at the build part, what drives the build cost? Well, build cost is driven by, firstly, the operational factors rather than by the AI capability. So the key drivers will usually include the workflow complexity. A linear workflow with very few branches will cost less to build than workflows with many decision points and conditional paths. Exception handling. Designing predictable behavior when inputs are incomplete, ambiguous, or conflicting often requires more effort than the main workflow. Integration requirements. Connecting to multiple systems increases build effort, particularly where data quality varies or interfaces are inconsistent. So these drivers reflect the effort required to make the solution usable and reliable in real operating environments. Now, the second part of the build and getting it useful for you is the deployment and testing costs. Now, the deployment cost is often underestimated. In practice, significant effort can be required to set appropriate access controls, test behavior with real data, validate the outputs with users, and observe performance under normal operating conditions. Where data is sensitive or regulated, additional review and testing are required. Now, these steps aren't optional overheads. They will make deployment safe and defensible. So fixed prices for everything from an AI audit through to deployment can appear reassuring, but they often hide trade-offs. A fixed price offered by a vendor will usually imply one or more constraints. It's going to imply probably a rushed AI audit. They're just trying to get it out of the way as quickly as possible. Limited scope, minimal exception handling, reduced testing, and lighter governance. In a low-risk scenario, this may be acceptable. In high-risk environments, it can introduce issues that only become visible after deployment. So by scoping work transparently instead, businesses can decide where to invest more, where to simplify, and where controls are essential. Another aspect of pricing that deserves attention is ongoing support. Support costs depend on how often workflows change, how critical reliability is, how much monitoring is required, and it also can be impacted by how often the software that any AI application interfaces with is updated. Now, some AI-enabled workflows remain stable for long periods. Others evolve as business conditions change. Now, rather than bundling support into a generic subscription, support is best scoped to match operational reality. So what does a sensible AI proposal look like? So following an AI audit, a sensible proposal will typically include a clearly defined scope, explicit inclusions and exclusions, expected effort and timeline, and a pricing tied directly to the scope. It will also document the assumptions, constraints, and areas of uncertainty. This allows decision makers to assess the value calmly and defensively. So pricing clarity is not about publishing a number. It's explaining about how effort, risk, and value are connected. This is why 80/20 Green starts with an audit, scopes work incrementally, and avoids fixed pricing that obscures trade-offs.